Greetings everyone, my name is Etterville, and welcome back to my Let's Play of Mega Man Dr. Wily's Final Attack. During the last part, I defeated Weatherman, Glacier Man, and Coppice Man. In this part, I'll be defeating the remaining two Roadmasters plus the secret one. Beginning with Spearman, of course. Spearman's stage is a bit easier than Speedwoman's stage, but not by much. Now, Spearman's stage seems to be modeled after Yamato Man's stage from Mega Man 6 in terms of, well, its structure and background images, as well as the platforms. And it also uses the team from Yamato Man's stage from Mega Man 6. As you may have noticed, this stage already starts out with a split pad, a bottom pad and a top pad. Now, this is one of the stages that was changed up the most in terms of level design, because before, in order to get the Bryan letter, you need to take the top route. Now you need to take the bottom route. I will be showing off both routes. Now, there are already two enemies you saw, those yellow charging enemies or whatever, who will start rapidly charging towards you once you get close enough to them. You also have the Panditas, which after charging will fire three balls in a arcing pattern at whatever your current position was. And then start charging again. And here's the Wily that I got. And we also have those balloons that, once you get under them, they'll start falling and trying to damage you. And we have our first mini-boss, this giant sword. It'll basically try lining itself up, and then try making a slash at your current position. In order to dodge it better, I suggest trying to go in the middle part of the room, stand there, and wait until you see where it's going to start going upwards. And use that to go to the opposite part of the screen, so you can easily dodge it. Remember that you can only damage it when its middle portion is revealed. And of course we have these crushers and those arrow blocks. Once you stand on these arrow blocks, it'll fire an arrow out, which will be solid, until it hits the end of a wall, which after a short while it'll dissipate. It kind of acts like the super arrow from Mega Man 5. And we have these crusher blocks. Of course, getting hit by the spikes at the bottom is instant death. I never really got hit by it once, but I suppose it is instant death. And now we have these platforms from Bryan Man's stage. I don't remember where exactly these platforms came from, so I'll leave it in the description. But once you stand on it, the arrow on top of it, or in the center of it, will fill up, and once it reaches its max, it'll start moving upwards. So you gotta be careful not to fall on the spikes or get crushed by one of the walls. And of course we also have these spike pillars or whatever, these spears, which after a certain period of time they'll go downwards or extend outwards, so you gotta be careful to not get hit by it. Thankfully they aren't instant death, but they do a quite significant amount of damage. Thankfully things like the speed drill make minced meat out of the Panditas at close range. And here's the final new enemy of the stage, these spear flies or something. Once they reach the same horizontal position as you, or just a little bit left or right of your horizontal position, they'll release an arrow which will fall down until it reaches the same vertical position as you are, and then stop for a while and then fire directly towards you. Thankfully you can either duck under it or jump over it easily. Alas, here's Spearman. Spearman basically has two attacks. The first one is when he jumps in the middle of the room and charges forward towards you. His second one is when he fires a spread of these three spears, one diagonally below you, diagonally above you, and straight forward. And then he jumps forward and charges towards you. Another one of his attacks is when he actually jumps forward and releases one of the spears, and then he charges forward. And of course, and that's basically his three sets of attacks. He does have a little bit of RNG involved as well, considering that when he'll actually fire those series of three spears and when he'll do the jump shot with the spear downwards, it can be mixed in a random pattern, but otherwise he's pretty much a reaction fight, and he's slow enough that you can dodge most of his attacks easily. Definitely not really a strict pattern like most of the other previous bosses, but not as RNG based as Coppice Man, for example. And by defeating Spearman, we get the spear shot. Each spear shot does 2 points of damage, but you can only have 2 of them on screen at once. But you can fire one straight ahead, fire one diagonally upwards or diagonally downwards. Now, in the original version of this game, the one I played in version 1.0, the original version, the spear shot could only be fired diagonally upwards or diagonally downwards. You couldn't fire it straight downwards, or straight ahead, but now you can. This was made so you could... This, in addition to the changes with the speed drill, was made to make the two weapons more distinguishable. Because in the original version, there wasn't really much of a difference between the speed drill and the spears. Mainly because both dealt about the same amount of damage and both were basically straight firing weapons. But now the speed drill is more used for shotgunning enemies at close range or rapidly damaging them, whereas the spear shot is used more for precision shots. Here's the upper route. Although I would say the upper route is much more difficult than the bottom route, and funny enough it doesn't even give you an extra letter either, so I suggest just taking the bottom route first. Alas, it's time to go to the final main Roadmaster stage, Speed Woman stage. As her name suggests, she's basically a speed type Roadmaster. And I don't really like the musical change that was made in the new version of the stage. In the original version of the stage, we had a remixed version of Dr. Wily's Fortress Course from Rockman Battle and Chase. But in this one, we basically have Nitro Man stage. I feel like the original stage theme from Rockman Battle and Chase was much more appropriate for the stage, because there isn't that many sudden cars or sudden reactions that you have to do like in Nitro Man stage. Whereas this one, everything is more... there's less sudden movements, other than the certain rocketing enemies. Which you may have noticed that if you get to a certain part of the screen, they'll rocket right towards you and you can easily get shunted off a platform, especially in later parts, as you see here. So always be on your guard and make sure to keep firing forward so you can avoid getting hit by those orange cone enemies. We also have these hanging mats, which, well, they'll hang on the ceiling, and once you get close enough to them, or after a while they'll fire wrenches at your last position. Thankfully they aren't that difficult to deal with as long as you have weapons that can fire upwards like the spear shot, or stuff like the frost arrow. You also have those trash can enemies where if you get close enough to them, after a while they'll basically get angry and start running towards you. And we have one of the gimmicks of the stage, these moving platforms or whatever. When you jump on them, they'll take you forward but in the direction they're pointing towards, or as indicated by there. And they only have a limited number of movement spaces before they explode, so keep that in mind. Thankfully they don't instantly explode once they get to the end. They kind of work like time blocks where there's a short delay before they explode once they reach the 0 section. Or the 0 number. Oh, and by the way, I almost missed the ladder, but over there in the top left there's a ladder that's almost hidden. You'll need to take that in order to get the Bryan ladder. The last Bryan ladder, that is. This is one of the segments where you need to be cautious while moving on these moving platforms. Mainly because of these cone enemies and the tellies. Well, mainly the tellies. But otherwise it isn't too bad. Thankfully this game allows you to move back quite a few screens, otherwise I would have to restart this entire stage. Kind of a sudden jump over there, but you do have enough time to react. Plus, this Roadmaster stage is Speed Woman after all, so you better be used to enemies popping up pretty fast. But they aren't as bad as some other stages in other Mega Man fan games. You do get enough time to react. Here's another segment of the stage. You basically have a car chase segment where you have to jump off these moving cars while avoiding getting hit by those yellow cone enemies, as well as those racer dudes or whatever at the bottom who are trying to fire those tree spread shots. After all, if you fall onto the road, you will instantly die. I never did, but I presume that that's what will happen. Thankfully, a seasonal barrier makes this stage a cinch, or this part of the stage a cinch, because you can block all of these shots, and you can one-shot all of the orange cone enemies at a time. In fact, that's why I keep saying the seasonal barrier is such an awesome ability in this game. Really, the most important items I would need in this game would be the speed drill, probably the spear arrow, the seasonal barrier, and the blaring blast. With those 4 weapons, I can easily beat the game. The rest are just insurance for extra utility and for Roadmaster weapons, or for extra weakness affiliations. And probably the Hawk Seeker as well, that would be my 5th weapon, because that'll make it a lot easier to deal with enemies that are far off and I can't directly fire diagonally at them. Like I can easily take care of these hanging mats by just using or spamming the Hawk Seeker. After all, once the Hawk Seeker destroys an enemy, it'll actually heat seeking into the next enemy as well. Too bad that the Hawkseeker that won't carry off projectiles or life pickups like certain other pickup items or utilities from other Mega Man fan games. It's just used for purely damaging enemies. There's no utility tank, unfortunately. Here's Speed Woman. Once Speed Woman gets close enough to you, or if you shoot at her, she'll jump over you, and as long as there's no mine deployed, she'll release a mine downwards. After moving around the room, or looping around the room 3 times, she'll stop and then release a spread of those 3 mines. Or 4 mines, and then after she leaves those on the ground, well, then she'll run back towards them, and as she races right over them or skates over them, she'll detonate them. So, but otherwise she follows the exactly set pattern, so it isn't much of a problem. And when I said those 3 cycles, I mean 3 cycles of leaving those mines. But because she follows a set pattern when she jumps, aka when you get close enough to her, and when you fire those shots, and when she leaves those mines, it's really easy to get used to her pattern and deal with her. There's no RNG involved like with Copper's Man or Spearman. And by defeating her, we get the control mine, which I found it to be one of the worst Roadmaster weapons in the game. Oh sure, it pierces through shields and it destroys all enemies on the same ground level as you are, or when you drop it, but there are better weapons that can be used and by collecting all 5 of the Bryan letters, we unlock Bryan Man stage, which is about double the length of a normal Roadmaster stage. And thankfully, it uses the same musical track it was in the original version of this game, that being a MIDI remix of Sunset Park Act 3 from Sonic Triple Trouble for the Game Gear. Which I do appreciate because an 8-bit version, well, it wouldn't sound as good as this one. So I highly thank the author, the Skipper in 1995, for keeping this original theme. Now in this stage we're going to see usage of the gimmicks from all 8 Roadmaster stages that we've seen before, with the addition of the Force Beams of course. So we're going to see gimmicks reused from the 8 Roadmaster stages, as well as enemies, like we see in the Crackouts from Weatherman stage. And we have this nice glassy aesthetic as well, so it's pretty good. And thankfully the Force Beams have been nerfed, which you'll see in a moment. I do appreciate the existence of this stage. It kinda reminds me of Yokuman's stage, although a lot easier. But unlike Yokuman's stage, instead of focusing on a new gimmick entirely, this one is kind of a remix of all of the 8 Roadmaster stage gimmicks and enemies, even more so compared to the Wily stage. In fact, this would actually be appropriate as a Wily stage as well, considering how it remixes each of the gimmicks. Although it is certainly harder than all 8 Roadmaster stages, but the original version of the stage was much harder than this one, for a reason you will see soon enough. And for the most part, the level design of the stage wasn't really changed. As a demonstration right here, before the Force Beams were instant death, but in this version they only deal 7 points of damage. I highly appreciate of the change because of how suddenly Force Beams can appear. Although I wish that spikes weren't instant death either, I wish they were like 14 points of damage instead. As you may have noticed, another nice addition with the new version of this game is that once you're at 9 max health, or 9 lives, once you collect another life, your life is instantly restored back to full. It's just like in Rock Force. Also, if you collect another E-Tank once you're at 9 E-Tanks, your health is restored to max as well. Your E-Tank is automatically used and it isn't wasted, which I also appreciate, thankfully. A lot of quality of life improvements that I highly appreciate and highly agree with. Another section of where the Force Beams would have originally killed me, but here it doesn't. In fact, it only took about 3 attempts to get through the stage, whereas in the original game, it took me 15 attempts to do so. That is in my original LP, mainly because of all the spikes and mainly the Force Beams getting trapped. And we have this cat enemy from Mega Man 3, I think. Although it's been modified to use different attacks where it fires a spread of those orbs, and then fire the orbs from its tail at the boss as a second phase. Well, we reached the half-point part of the stage. Really, if I were to compare it with all the other Roadmaster stages, it's up there with Weatherman's stage for being one of my favorite Roadmaster stages in the entire game. And here's the unique gimmick of this stage other than the Force Beams. On the top is the actual stage, at the bottom is basically the level terrain. It'll be flipped soon enough, but you need to see what's on the top so you don't instantly die and fall into the pit. It's a nice unique gimmick, and I appreciate it a lot here. I appreciate how it's used here a lot more than how it's used in that one level in Mega Man Endless. It's a lot more fair. Here's the part where it flips over. Now the top part is always the one you need to be worried about, so there's no spikes at the bottom. But there are spikes at the top, so you gotta be a bit careful. So yeah, I do appreciate that gimmick, but I do wish that it was utilized a bit more. But to be fair, we don't have a Mirror Man stage, and Bryan Man isn't really a mirror-based Roadmaster. But as I was saying earlier, this is basically one of my favorite Roadmaster stages, tied with Weatherman. To be fair, it's one of the more unique ones, the unique Roadmaster stages in this game being Digital Man, Sound Man, Weatherman specifically for the seasonal gimmicks, as well as this stage. And maybe Speed Woman's stage as well, can't forget her. These are the 5 Roadmaster stages I found to be quite unique. Compass Man is the traditional Forest Roadmaster stage at this point. Glacier Man is basically the Ice Roadmaster. And Earthman is, well, an Earth-based Roadmaster as well, whereas Spearman, well, he's a little bit different, but he's like Yamato Man, plus he's kind of like one of those city-based Roadmasters or fortress-based. So he's kind of in the mid-uniqueness, but I didn't really... Well, his stage is kind of more forgettable because, like Yamato Man's stage in Mega Man 6, I kind of forgot about it and preferred the more other stages which focused a bit more on unique gimmicks compared to that stage focusing more on platforming and the stage hazards itself. I should have gone through this part of the stage faster, but thankfully in this version, as I keep repeating, I don't instantly die. There's a lot more leeway for mistakes, thankfully. And we've reached the boss quarter. Thankfully we don't have the Wily symbol because Bryan Man doesn't really work for Wily. I made a sudden jump cut over here because I died against Bryan Man due to a silly mistake I made. Bryan Man is one of the more unpredictable Roadmasters, to be fair. He fires I think twice, and he always jumps when you fire at him, and you do damage specifically. And after certain intervals he will fire those bouncing rings. And those rings come from the Sonic Game Gear games as evidenced by the Sonic statue at the beginning of the stage and at the top of this boss room. And then after a while he'll spin around the middle of the room and fire those red rings which will bounce around the room in a little bit of a shorter period of time. I don't know how you're supposed to dodge it without staying directly below him, unless you're a little bit more precise. But if you do stand below him, make sure to jump or move out of the way after his final set of rings so he doesn't run into you, because him running into you does a lot of damage, in fact. But rinse and repeat, and he's down. Well, and by defeating Bryan Man we get the special attack, which will either give you an E-Tank, a life up, or an extra life. But you can only use 2 special attacks per weapon bar. Well then, with the last 3 Roadmasters defeated, in the next part I'll go through the first 3 Wily stages. Thanks for watching and have a nice day. Toodles!